I still remember the exact moment my husband told me the baby I was carrying wasn't his. It was a quiet Sunday evening. The sun was already going down, casting a warm orange light through the living room window. I was sitting on the couch, one hand resting gently on my stomach, feeling the small movements that had started just a few weeks earlier. 5 months pregnant. At that moment, I felt peaceful, safe, happy. Marcus walked into the room and dropped his car keys on the table a little harder than usual. I looked up at him and smiled. "You're home early," I said. He didn't smile back. Instead, he stood there looking at me in a way I couldn't understand. His eyes looked cold, almost distant. "Marcus?" I asked softly. "Is everything okay?" He didn't answer immediately. He slowly sat down in the chair across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Then he said something that made my entire world stop. "That baby isn't mine." For a moment, I thought I had heard him wrong. "What?" I said, almost laughing in confusion. Marcus didn't laugh. His face stayed serious. "I said that baby isn't mine." My heart started pounding. "Marcus, what are you talking about?" I asked. He looked straight at my stomach. "You know exactly what I'm talking about." I felt a chill run through my entire body. "Are you accusing me of cheating on you?" He didn't even hesitate. "Yes." The word hit me like a slap. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. My mind was racing, trying to understand how the man I had loved for 6 years could suddenly look at me like I was a stranger. "Marcus," I said slowly, trying to stay calm, "I have never cheated on you. Not once." He leaned back in the chair and crossed his arms. Then explained something to me. "What?" "The timing." My stomach tightened. "What timing?" He stood up and started pacing across the room. "You told me you were pregnant 3 months after I came back from that business trip." "Yes," I said, "because that's when I found out." Marcus shook his head. "That's not possible." "Why not?" He stopped pacing and looked straight at me. "Because before I left for that trip, I went to see a doctor." My heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" Marcus swallowed hard. "The doctor told me something I didn't want to believe at first." The room suddenly felt too quiet. "What did he say?" I whispered. Marcus's voice dropped. "He said I can't have children." For a moment, everything around me felt like it was spinning. That's impossible," I said. "I took tests, Anna," Marcus replied. "More than once." My hands began to shake. "So now you think I got pregnant by someone else?" Marcus looked at me with a mixture of anger and pain. "What else am I supposed to think?" Tears began forming in my eyes. "You're supposed to trust me," I said. He laughed bitterly. "Trust you? After this?" I slowly stood up from the couch. "Marcus, listen to me," I said. "I swear to you I have never been with another man." But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. He grabbed his jacket from the chair. "Where are you going?" I asked. "I need air," he said. "Marcus, please." But the door was already closing behind him. The sound of it slamming echoed through the house. I stood there in the middle of the living room, my hands still resting on my stomach. Tears were now running down my face. For the next hour, I sat on the couch trying to understand what had just happened. Marcus thought I had betrayed him, and somehow, he believed the baby inside me wasn't his. But that didn't make any sense. I had never cheated on him. Not even close. Our marriage had always been strong. We rarely fought, and even when we did, we always talked things through. So how could he suddenly believe something like this? The next morning, Marcus still hadn't come home. I barely slept that night. Around 8 a.m., my phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from him. "We need a DNA test when the baby is born." My chest tightened when I read the words. A DNA test. He didn't believe me at all. I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "Fine." If that was what it took to prove the truth, then so be it. But deep down, something about Marcus's reaction didn't feel right. Yes, the doctor told him he couldn't have children. But doctors can be wrong sometimes, right? I tried to convince myself that everything would be fine once the DNA test proved the baby was his. Marcus would realize he made a terrible mistake. We would fix our marriage. Things would go back to normal. At least, that's what I believed at the time. What I didn't know then was that the DNA test would reveal something none of us were prepared for. Not Marcus, not me, and definitely not the rest of our family. The next few weeks were the hardest weeks of my life. Marcus barely spoke to me anymore. Even though we still lived in the same house, it felt like we were strangers sharing the same space. He slept in the guest room. He avoided looking at my stomach. And every time I tried to talk about the baby, he would shut down the conversation.
Like our stories? Subscribe and share to follow for more.
One evening while I was making dinner, he walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water. I could feel the tension in the room immediately. Marcus, I said softly, we can't keep living like this. He didn't answer. You're treating me like I did something wrong. He turned to face me. If the baby is mine, the test will prove it, he said coldly. And if it proves it's yours? I asked. Marcus hesitated. Then he looked away. We'll deal with that when the time comes. Those words hurt more than I expected. Because even if the test proved the truth, something inside our marriage had already been broken. Months passed slowly. The pregnancy continued, but the joy I once felt had disappeared. Every doctor appointment felt heavy, knowing Marcus didn't even want to come with me anymore. My mother started noticing the change. One afternoon she called me. Anna, sweetheart, are you okay? She asked gently. I forced a small laugh. Of course I am. You don't sound okay. I hesitated. Then the words just came out. Marcus thinks the baby isn't his. There was silence on the phone. What? My mother finally said. He says a doctor told him he can't have children. My mother sighed. That doesn't mean he's right. I know, I whispered, but he doesn't believe me. A week later, my mother insisted on coming to stay with me for a few days. Marcus wasn't happy about it. The tension in the house grew even worse. One evening after dinner, my mother pulled me aside. Anna, have you ever considered that maybe the doctor was wrong? I have, I said. Then the DNA test will prove everything. I nodded. That's what I'm hoping. But deep down, something strange had started bothering me. Marcus had always wanted children. He used to talk about it all the time. When we first got married, he would joke about how he wanted a big family. 2 kids, maybe 3. So why had he never told me about this doctor visit before? Why had he kept something so important a secret? The thought stayed in the back of my mind, but I tried not to focus on it too much. 2 months later, the baby finally arrived. It was a long night at the hospital. My mother was there holding my hand through the contractions. Marcus arrived just before the delivery. But even then, he stayed near the door like he didn't know where he belonged. Hours later, I heard the sound that changed everything. A baby crying. The nurse placed the small bundle in my arms. It's a boy, she said with a smile. Tears filled my eyes as I looked at him. He was perfect. Tiny fingers, soft skin, a little head full of dark hair. Marcus stepped closer slowly. For a moment, he stared at the baby silently. Then he looked at me. We're still doing the DNA test, he said. My heart sank. Even now, he couldn't let go of the doubt. 2 days later, the hospital arranged the test. A nurse gently collected samples from Marcus and the baby. It will take about a week for the results, she explained. 7 days. 7 days that felt longer than the entire pregnancy. Marcus barely visited during that week. When he did, he kept his distance from the baby. Watching him act like that broke my heart, because the little boy in the crib had done nothing wrong. Finally, the day came. Marcus and I sat together in the doctor's office. Neither of us spoke while the doctor opened the envelope. My hands were shaking. The doctor scanned the paper quietly. Then his eyebrows slowly furrowed. Marcus leaned forward. Well, he asked. The doctor looked confused. This result is unexpected. My heart started racing. What does that mean? I asked. The doctor looked directly at Marcus. The test shows that you are not the father. Marcus suddenly stood up. I knew it, he said angrily. But the doctor raised a hand. Please sit down. I'm not finished. Marcus froze. What do you mean? The doctor looked back at the paper. The baby is not genetically related to you, but there's something else very strange about this result. My stomach twisted. What is it? I whispered. The doctor took a deep breath. The baby isn't genetically related to the mother either. The room went completely silent. I stared at him in shock. That's impossible, I said. I carried him for 9 months. The doctor nodded slowly. I understand. That's why this result doesn't make sense. Marcus looked just as confused now. What are you saying? He asked. The doctor leaned back in his chair. I'm saying that according to this DNA test, this child is not biologically related to either of you. My heart started pounding. But that's not possible. The doctor nodded again. There's only one explanation. Marcus and I both leaned forward. What explanation? Marcus asked. The doctor looked directly at us. The babies may have been switched at the hospital. And in that moment, my entire world shattered all over again. For several seconds, neither Marcus nor I said a single word. The doctor's words hung in the air like something unreal. The babies may have been switched at the hospital. My mind refused to process what he had just said. That can't be right, I whispered. The doctor sighed and folded his hands on the desk. I understand how shocking this is, he said calmly, but the DNA results are very clear. This child is not biologically related to either of you. Marcus rubbed his face in disbelief. So you're saying the baby we took home from the hospital isn't ours? The doctor nodded slowly. It's possible that there was a mistake in the maternity ward. My heart started racing. But where is our baby? I asked. That's exactly what we need to find out, the doctor replied. The hospital immediately began an internal investigation. Within a few hours, nurses and administrators were reviewing records, checking identification tags, and speaking with the staff who were working the night I gave birth. Marcus and I sat in a small waiting room holding the baby that might not even be ours. I looked down at him sleeping peacefully in my arms. Even if the test said he wasn't mine, my heart didn't care. I had carried a child for 9 months. I had gone through hours of pain bringing him into the world. How could a piece of paper suddenly tell me he wasn't my son? Marcus sat quietly across from me. For the first time in months, he looked completely lost. Finally, he spoke. Anna? I looked up. His voice was softer than it had been in a long time. I'm sorry. The words surprised me. For accusing you, he continued. I thought you betrayed me. Tears filled my eyes. You didn't even give me a chance to explain, I said. I know, he said quietly. And I hate myself for that. For a moment, we just sat there in silence. Everything we had been fighting about suddenly felt meaningless compared to what was happening now. A nurse entered the room. The hospital director would like to speak with you. Marcus and I followed her down a long hallway until we reached a small office. Inside, 2 administrators were sitting at a table with several files in front of them. One of them stood up. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, he said politely, thank you for your patience. Did you find our baby? I asked immediately. The 2 administrators exchanged a glance. We may have. My heart jumped. What do you mean, may? Marcus asked. The man opened one of the files. There was another couple who had a baby delivered the same night as yours. Their son was born only 20 minutes after your delivery. My chest tightened. And? I asked. The identification numbers on the baby's wristbands were extremely similar. It appears that during the transfer from the delivery room to the nursery, the babies may have been placed in the wrong bassinets. My hands started shaking. So our baby was given to another family? That is what we are trying to confirm. Marcus leaned forward. Where are they? They live in the same city, the administrator said. Have they done a DNA test? I asked. The man nodded slowly. Yes. My heart felt like it was about to burst. And? Marcus asked. The administrator took a deep breath. The test confirms that the child they took home from the hospital is biologically yours. For a moment, the room spun around me. Our baby was alive, but he had been living with another family for 2 months. Marcus looked stunned. So where is he now? He asked. The administrator hesitated. That is where the situation becomes complicated. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I asked nervously. The man folded his hands. The other family doesn't want to give the baby back. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. What? I whispered. They have been raising him since the day he was born, the administrator explained. They believe he is their son. Marcus stood up suddenly. But he isn't their son. We understand that, the administrator replied calmly. Then why would they refuse to return him? The man looked uncomfortable. Because they've already formed a bond with the child. My chest felt like it was breaking. That's my baby, I said, my voice trembling. Marcus placed a hand on my shoulder. What happens now? He asked. The administrator sighed. This situation will likely need to be resolved through the courts. A court, a legal battle, just to bring our baby home. I looked down at the sleeping baby in my arms again, the child who wasn't biologically mine, but who I had already started to love. And somewhere out there, my real son was being held by another family who refused to give him back.
Like our stories? Subscribe and share to follow for more.
The words, they don't want to give the baby back, kept echoing in my head. It didn't feel real. Somewhere in the same city, my son was being held by another family, a family who believed he belonged to them, and the baby sleeping in my arms, the one I had been feeding, rocking, and comforting every night, wasn't biologically mine. My heart felt like it was being pulled in 2 different directions. Marcus broke the silence first. We want to meet them, he said firmly. The hospital administrators exchanged uneasy glances. That might not be possible right away, one of them replied. Why not? Marcus asked. Because they're extremely emotional about the situation, the man explained. When they were informed about the DNA results, they reacted strongly. I swallowed. What do you mean strongly? They refused to accept the results at first. They insisted the test must be wrong. Marcus clenched his jaw. But it isn't wrong. I know, the administrator said. But they've had the baby since the day he was born. To them, that child is their son. My chest tightened. I understand that, I said quietly. But he's still my baby. The man nodded. and the baby you took home is biologically theirs. That sentence hurt in a strange way, because it was true. The tiny boy in my arms had parents somewhere who had also been living a lie. Marcus rubbed his temples. So what happens now? The hospital's legal team has already contacted both families, the administrator said. A court hearing will determine the next step. The word court made my stomach twist. Days passed slowly. Marcus and I returned home, but the house felt heavier than ever. Everything had changed. The anger between us had disappeared, replaced by something much deeper. Fear. One evening, Marcus sat beside me on the couch while I held the baby. For the first time in months, he reached out and gently touched the child's tiny hand. "He's innocent in all this," Marcus said quietly. I nodded. "I know." Marcus looked down. "I spent months blaming you when none of this was your fault." Tears filled my eyes. "We both went through something terrible," I whispered. He sighed. "I almost destroyed our marriage because of my fear." I looked at him. "But you didn't," I said softly. Marcus shook his head. "I came close." A week later, the court hearing finally arrived. Marcus and I sat nervously in the courtroom as the other family entered. They were a young couple. The woman was holding a baby wrapped in a blue blanket. My heart immediately knew. That was my son. Tears began running down my face before I could stop them. The woman holding him looked just as emotional. She clutched the baby tightly as if she was afraid someone might take him away at any moment. The judge listened carefully as the hospital explained the mistake. Then both families were asked to speak. Marcus stood first. "We don't blame this couple," he said calmly. "They loved the child they believed was theirs. But the truth is that baby belongs to my wife and me." The woman from the other family began crying. Her husband held her hand tightly. When it was their turn to speak, the man stood up. "We understand the DNA results," he said, "but we've been raising that baby since the day he was born. He knows our voices. He sleeps in our home. He's our son." The courtroom fell silent. Then the judge spoke. "This situation is heartbreaking for both families," he said, "but the biological truth cannot be ignored." He looked at both couples. "The babies must be returned to their biological parents." The woman holding my son broke down in tears. My own tears were falling freely now, too. Because in that moment, I realized something painful. She loved him, too, just like I loved the baby in my arms. A few minutes later, the exchange happened. Slowly, carefully, both mothers walked toward each other. My hands trembled as I handed the baby boy I had cared for over to his biological mother. She held him tightly, crying softly. Then she gently placed my son into my arms. The moment I held him, something inside me changed. I could feel it instantly. A connection deeper than anything I had ever felt before. Marcus leaned close, looking down at the baby. "He looks like you," he whispered. For the first time in months, I smiled. When we returned home that night, Marcus held our son while I sat beside him. After a while, he looked at me. "I almost lost everything," he said quietly. "Not just the baby, but you too." I reached for his hand. "Then let's make sure we never forget what really matters." Marcus nodded. Because in the end, the DNA test hadn't just revealed the truth about the baby. It revealed the truth about our marriage too. And this time, we weren't going to let fear destroy it again.
Like our stories? Subscribe and share to follow for more.